What's good, friends list, episode 115 of the Game Pass Gamecast coming at you. For months now, we've been hearing about a mysterious remaster collection that includes Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and San Andreas, in what seems to be a palate-cleansing move to tide us over until the inevitable GTA 6. But a recent fan remake of the former two has popped up only to be met by legal action by Rockstar's parent company, Take-Two. So, do they have legal ground to actually stand on? So, this week, we examine the current legal dispute between a set of programmers and Take-Two over a fully remade version of the two beloved open-world classics. If a fan-made remake is made with no reused assets and requires you to already own the game, is there a gray area for both parties to thrive? We try our best to put our legal caps on and dig into the subject. Also, Tripwire parts ways with CEO John Gibson over remarks favoring Texas' new abortion law. Halo Infinite makes another major change to its radar system, and much, much more coming up on the newest jam-packed episode of the Game Pass Gamecast.
Now the fun begins.
Richard.
Stop! You violated the law.
Welcome back to another episode of the Game Pass Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox, Xbox Game Pass, and of course PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversation around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and of course, all other major podcast services. And if we're not on one that you use, let us know. We'll get on it. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all that jazz, the whole rigmarole I tell you every week, wherever you get a podcast at. And follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games like, and of course, our dope giveaways, which we do have a few planned for later this year. Maybe around a certain game coming out. I don't know. But
what game would that be?
I don't know. There's not many games.
It might not even come out this year.
Fun fact: video games are actually dead. They're canceled. No more video games ever, at all. So I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyways, though, I'm your host as always, Travis White, aka Travelus, on most internet platforms. Joining me as always, my partner in crime, Mike P-Pack. Mike, the age-old question that comes up every week on the show that I know you prepare for every week. What's good? What's going on? And of course, what have you been playing?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been playing. I
don't know if you're good too, you know.
Everything's good. You know, I'm no complaints here. Mm-hmm. Everything's grand. Everything's terrific. But I've been playing some Hunt Showdown again, having some fun. Me and Adam we're getting into it again today.
Nice. And
you know, me and Adam have been begging for some Dust to Tale of the Wild West to get remastered on good old games, on GOGgy, on Goggerini. Mm-hmm. And here, never knew that they did Titanic in 2018. So it's on Steam. Really? It's on Steam.
No shit.
It's on GOG. So yeah, you can play Titanic: A Tale Out of Time today. And shit, I'm going to be streaming it very soon because I think the game deserves to get some eyes on it. I might even record the entire thing to put it on YouTube because I do believe that the game is worth, you know, it's worth a look. It's definitely, it's legendary, and it's a part of the history of video games. I mean, you got to think the game came out in like 96 or something ridiculous.
Stranger.
So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't realize they actually did Titanic. That it does kind of piss me off though now knowing that they did that and obviously didn't do Dust yet. Which
that's kind of what me and Adam were saying. Like if you've already done Titanic, Adventure Out of Time, how much harder would it be for you to do Dust? Like you've already done a lot of the legwork, right? So
right.
How much more difficult could it be to just add Dust also? So that's kind of something that we were talking about. And hopefully because Titanic was done, they'll do Dust, or if not, like me and Adam both bought Titanic today because it's only like, it's something stupid like $7 or something. So hopefully maybe if more people are buying it and stuff, maybe they'll take the time, you know what I mean?
That's right, exactly. I'm going to buy it. I mean, hell, for, you know, only
$7.
Right, yeah, for a couple bucks.
And it's an incredible point and click adventure. And even though it's a little wonky, like I feel like some of the some of the ways that the map like actually loads and stuff like that,
Mhm.
I feel like it is a little weird, but I honestly do think it's something that like you and Molly could even get into together. And I know you guys are always looking for new games to play together,
Mhm.
and I honestly think like she would enjoy it a lot too because it's it's a big like it's like an investigative game that I think she would enjoy the storylines behind it and everything.
Oh, definitely. Actually, I'll do you one better. It's $6.
Oh, there you go.
So there you go. I'm purchasing it right now as we talk. So, but yes, I mean she loves point and click adventures like that. She plays a ton of those Nancy Drew games back in the day, and even now she still has. There's a whole like fucking crate full of them in our closet. So like so she loves stuff like that. So definitely would be something that, we could definitely play together. But yeah, I really hope that does eventually get to be something that they get around to doing, and eventually getting Dust on there, because that is a game that, playing at your house growing up and stuff like that, I do have fond memories for, and you watching you like basically speed run the game for the most part. Like it just, I really hope that, and I definitely think right now, especially too, we see so much love for point and click adventures starting to come back, and just adventure games in general, but specifically point and click ones. You look at how much how much fervor and excitement was around whenever we see Double Fine and kind of bring back their legendary, or at least Tim Schafer's involvement in, Double Fine kind of taking over and remastering these games, Monkey Island and Grim Fandango and Full Throttle and all these like beloved point and click adventure games, having new life once again. So I would love to see more of that kind of come out, because I think those are very accessible games and everything like that. But yeah, Hunt Showdown, I guess on my end too, I talk about that as well. That's one game we've been playing the past couple nights, and getting in there, finding Shrek's hut and everything last night. So yeah, it's nice to get back in there, check out the new update, check out the new map. And it's one of those games that is very easily accessible for all of us to play. I like that it has a decent balance of PvE versus PvP. That I think it still levels that out pretty well. That the PvE, like one side of the action doesn't necessarily feel better than the other, because there's some games that have both PvP and PvE in it that it definitely feels like one's tacked on and the other isn't. On either side sometimes. So it's much more. I find this to have a good balance on either side. Like both feel equally pretty well made. So I've been enjoying that. And outside of that, I'm trying to think what all Molly and I have jumped into. We started playing A Plague Tale, Innocence, which I started playing like, I think it was literally like a week before the original pandemic lockdown. And I had started a little bit before that, but I like wrapped it up. I didn't finish it, but I had to like put it down because I was like, this is getting a little too close to home at that point. Whenever like COVID was starting to really ramp up at the beginning, I was like, you know what? This is hitting too close to home. I'm going to put this one down and come back to it. Really enjoying it, but I'm going to come back to it. So we've been playing that. It's on Game Pass now, and with a Series X version of it. So a next gen version of it. So being optimized for that, we jumped in on there and start playing it on there, and we're having a good time on that. So that'll probably be the game we kind of plug away at together for the next part. But outside of that, I'm trying to think, what else have we been playing? Like you and I and Adam. You and I have been playing Faz, and we played a little bit of Dead by Daylight and a little bit of Halo. But of course, on my end, like I said, I'm back on my old crack pipe. I'm back on Destiny 2, baby. So I've been jumping into that. Like I said last week, not much has changed. I hit the soft cap for my hunter that I have for this season. So I'm going through and just kind of chipping away at going for the hard cap, and then going for max power level this time around for this season. But this season's 6 months long, so like, and it's really good. Like I said, Destiny's in a really good place right now, because I think of how long this season's going to be and the way it sets it up. Because my biggest gripe with Destiny right now, from somebody who's relatively new, like, I played a little bit of Destiny 1 when it first released, which is crazy that that game released like 7 years ago today, which is wild to think about. But the but I played a little bit of Destiny when it first came out, fell off, didn't jump into Destiny 2 until, maybe like a year or two after it came out, and like we're talking Destiny 2 vanilla, like, and played a little bit, but not really anything to write home on. And then last summer kind of got in for about 20 hours or so, had a cup of coffee, liked what I was playing, and got out. And that's whenever it was like right whenever when Destiny had their first little show, or Bungie had their first little showcase for Destiny to say like, hey, here's the future of Destiny, what we're doing. And really started opening me up to the idea of getting into Destiny because of just them finally having their independence and freedom outside of Activision, and really getting to do the game that I think they wanted to originally do, sans Microsoft, when they wanted to get away from them. So, was enjoying it, kind of fell off other games playing and yada yada and whatnot, you know how that is, but got back into it earlier this year, heavy, and like, I think I'm maybe about, 100 hours in almost invested into it. I think that's what Steam says. So, I got a lot of ways to go with it, but I'm still very much a new player. And my biggest gripe, though, is that there's so much lore with this universe, and the fact that they've introduced the Vault now really kind of screws new players up. And granted, you hear from a lot of seasoned players too. Like, I've been playing Destiny for 7 years now, and I couldn't, the lore to me is all over the place. Like, but there's so much of it there, and you hear so many people talk about, like, once you get it, you get it. But for where we are right now with Destiny and bringing on new players with New Light, the free, the quote unquote free to play version of Destiny, that takes you through basically, all new players and whatnot. They've now vaulted the original campaign for Destiny 2. So you're literally just jumping in. If you buy, the Legendary Edition of Destiny 2, you get Forsaken and Shadowkeep as well on top of that, which are the first two expansions, and now Beyond Light's the current one that's going on, and then Witch Queen's the next one that's going to be coming in February, I believe. So, but you could play those three expansions, but you're not really going to, like, understand a lot. And that's my biggest gripe with it. That it's just, like, Forsaken's really fun because it is very straightforward. It's a redemption arc. It's a story of revenge and stuff like that, like breaking the cycle, and it's really good. But you're not, like, super invested in these characters. Like, and that's my biggest gripe with it is, I'm not for hand-holding necessarily, but when we're talking about a MMO, like an action MMO for the most part, and, that's also a pseudo FPS that has all of this lore, that this is one of those games, hey, we want Destiny to be the game you play kind of thing. Like, I'm willing to invest time into this because I really like the premise of Destiny, but there needs to be a little more. If Bungie wants new players to come in and invest long term and keep continuing to grow Destiny into what their vision is, and I think they are doing that, it's just going to take a while. It's being a little more accommodating to new players. Just clearly, if I put in 100 hours into this game, there's something I like about it. So, but it's just one of those things that kind of rubs me the wrong way. That I'm like, I know this could be better than what it is, and I think a lot of people do feel that kind of across the board. But it is in a good place. It's in a much better place. And the way, like I was getting around to saying, the 6-month expansion window for this season, I should say, leading into Witch Queen, it's really kind of a prologue for that next expansion. And it really does actually set up a decent narrative of light versus darkness, and kind of setting that up finally, that a lot of people have been saying after like 7 years, we're finally getting to that point that it's kind of been building up to. So it is putting it in a really good place that I think we're finally going to turn that corner a little bit and get into a really solid place with Destiny come, February. So, but it's really trending in the right way, and I'm having a ton of fun with it, getting in there, doing my dailies, doing my weeklies, things like that. So anyways, though, Mike, before we get too long in the tooth, I think it's time for Button Mash. If you're new to the show, Button Mash is where we go over the quick hit news of the week, set you up before we get into our big topics for this week. So, kicking off Button Mash, starting with, of course, Microsoft in general. I mean, it is that show. This is our show, Microsoft and Xbox and all that. But Microsoft is testing a new firmware update for Bluetooth-enabled Xbox One controllers, Xbox Elite 2 controllers, and Xbox Adaptive controllers that will grant them a range of next-gen features previously only available on Xbox Series X and S controllers. Microsoft announced that it has begun testing the new firmware update in a blog post on the Xbox website. The firmware update, which is available to Alpha Skip Ahead and Alpha users today, aims to reduce controller latency and improve cross-device connectivity. In terms of the latter, the firmware update will allow the compatible controllers to support Bluetooth Low Energy, which allows for better pairing experiences between devices. The majority of Xbox One controllers are already able to utilize Bluetooth support when connecting to a PC or smartphone, but pair with the Xbox consoles through the Xbox Wireless Protocol. The Bluetooth Low Energy update will allow for a quicker switching experience between Xbox Wireless and Bluetooth devices, as players will be able to do so at the double tap of the pair button. The Titanfall 2 community is once again being roiled by issues with hacking, with rumors on Twitter and social channels of a major security vulnerability. Holy hell, I can spit that one out. The rumors appear to stem from the screenshot of a Discord announcement, which has been making the rounds for most of the day. The bug reportedly allows local code execution from Respawn servers, potentially affecting both PC and console with Titanfall 2 installed. While there are still plenty of unknowns, several community members have raised the alarm and encouraged players to uninstall the game until the vulnerability is fixed. Respawn responded on Twitter, quote, "We are aware of reports of a security vulnerability affecting Titanfall 2 and are investigating. We have no other information to share at this moment, but we'll update once we do." Fallout 76's newest season arrives right now, today, despite a previous announcement that it would be delayed. Bethesda Game Studios says the Fallout Worlds update, along with the start of Season 6, is out today, adding public and custom world game modes to Fallout 76. Fallout Worlds introduces 2 new customizable ways to play Fallout 76. Public worlds will feature a rotation of themed experiences that will shake up the world for players. One example is an option called Happy Builder that will reduce building restrictions and disable PvP. The update also introduces custom worlds, which will be available for those who subscribe to Fallout First, the game's premium membership. Here, players can create a game world tailored to their liking. Up to 8 friends can play in one custom world together, and players can even invite those who don't have the Fallout First membership. And you can find more information on the new game modes by reading the patch notes and whatnot. Bungie is hiring for a new senior executive who will help bring Destiny's narrative from video games across to the world of TV, film, and more. A career listing on Bungie's website for a new senior executive development role at the studio, spotted by the Game Post, says that the successful candidate will quote, drive projects that extend the Destiny franchise into new categories, including TV, film, books, comics, and audio formats. Bungie itself doesn't appear to be hiring for positions to create the new range of Destiny products in-house. Instead, the new executive's role will be to identify, select, guide, collaborate, and provide feedback to third parties and partners, enabling them to tell additional myths in the Destiny universe that delight our fans while capturing the hearts and minds of new audiences. With Forza Horizon 5 just around the corner, Xbox Game Studios and Playground Games have revealed a huge list of cars that players will be able to choose from when setting out across the game's vast and diverse Mexican landscape. Despite the list already containing several hundred cars, the developer has confirmed that there's still more to come. Forza Motorsport's official website currently lists 426 different vehicles to drive. Playground announced a number of debuts on the list, as well as confirming that more cars would be added in due course. The post reads, "Stay tuned because this isn't the final list for launch date. We'll be expanding it even more with even more cars in manufacturers in the weeks leading up to November 9th, so be sure to check back regularly for all of the latest updates." Epic Games has been showcasing the upcoming Unreal Engine 5 with a series of impressive tech demos, and now the protagonist from these demos is coming to Fortnite, of course. Also, she's apparently named Windwalker Echo. Windwalker Echo is the formerly unnamed character that starred in Epic's various Unreal Engine 5 tech demos. This includes the Lumen in the Land of Nantine Tech video that showed off the lighting and geometry tool, as well as the Valley of the Ancients tech demo. A group of current and former Ubisoft employees have responded to the company's appointment of a new chief creative officer, urging him and the company to provide a, quote, meaningful response to Ubisoft's culture of systemic discrimination, harassment, and bullying. The statement was issued by employee group A Better Ubisoft in response to the announcement today that Igor Manchu would succeed Serge Hassad as the company's chief creative officer. Following allegations, Hassad had been a key propagator of toxic company culture. Manchu, who has been with Ubisoft since 1998, has had previously held several leadership roles in Ubisoft marketing, working on franchises such as Far Cry, Rainbow Six, and Splinter Cell. In 2014, he worked as the creative director on Steep and followed up in the same role on Riders Republic. However, as an employee group points out, Manchu's appointment does not appear to be in line with CEO Yves Guillemot's promises to overhaul the company's editorial team. As Guillemot wrote in a letter to employees upon Hassad's departure, quote, "I will take on the CCO role temporarily as we work to define and organize the leadership of the editorial department. During this time, I will also personally oversee a complete overhaul of the way in which this team works. My goal is to create an inclusive and open culture that embraces more diverse and more disciplinary expertise." Remedy has announced a full remaster of its cult classic Alan Wake, due to arrive this fall on PS5, PS4, Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, and PC via the Epic Games Store. Perhaps more excitingly, it opens up the door more than ever for an Alan Wake 2 to come down the line. After a leak last week, Remedy and publisher Epic announced that Alan Wake Remastered would come to with both of the game's expansions, allow for 4K resolution, and will include a new commentary from creative director Sam Lake. No official release date has been announced, but the previous retailers' leaks have pointed to October 5th. Lake himself wrote about the remaster on Alan Wake / Remedy's fan site, The Sudden Stop, beginning his letter by writing, quote, "This is for you." He confirmed that the game was almost complete and that it is, quote, "the original experience you fell in love with all those years ago. We did not want to change that, but the visuals all around, including the character model of Alan Wake himself and the cinematics, have been updated and improved with some choice next-generation updates." Stardew Valley creator Eric Barone says that he is currently focusing on creating a new, unrevealed game rather than fresh updates for his immensely popular farming simulator. Speaking recently to Zach Hartman on Twitch, as reported by Eurogamer, following the conclusion of the first official Stardew Valley Cup, Barone explained that he's currently not working on future Stardew Valley updates because he has been focused on a new game. Quote, "I'm not saying there's going to be another Stardew Valley update," Barone added during his response to the fans' questions surrounding future updates and marriage options within the game. Quote, I don't even know at this point. Right now I'm focused on my next game, so we'll see." Whilst Barone kept details surrounding the new title close to his chest, he did provide fans a few details to mull over in the lead up to the official reveal, which he then teased may end up coming sometime in the near future. Quote, "I may announce it fairly soon. What it is, no one knows at this point," he said during the stream. "What I will say is that it's another pixel art game, a top-down perspective similar to Stardew Valley. In some ways, it kind of is similar to Stardew Valley, but it's also not a farming game. It's something different," end quote. And finally, Mike, the 2022 season of Overwatch League will use an early build of Overwatch 2. This news comes by way of Dot Esports, which also reports the 5th season of the Overwatch League is expected to begin on time next April, as announced by the league's vice president, John Spector. After rumors of a year-long hiatus for the league being ramped up, Blizzard recently confirmed them to be false. The company said that while a release date for the 2022 season start had not been announced yet, a 5th season of the Overwatch League would be happening nonetheless. So, Mike, after all of that, before we head into our big topics for this week, anything you want to run back to set the stage up?
Yeah, I want to just talk about real quick about the Xbox adaptive controllers and Xbox Elite 2 and the Xbox One controllers and how they're trying to ramp up the Bluetooth on them so reaction time and all that stuff works a little bit better. It might seem like kind of like a small detail, but Xbox is working tirelessly currently to try to perfect their craft. And I just want to give them a shout out for that because it would be easy for them to just be like, "Oh, that's good enough. We'll figure out what's next." But they're actually, consciously trying to make their products better, every chance that they get. So That's going to be really cool. And the only other thing I really wanted to talk about is the Overwatch League using an early build of Overwatch 2. I think this is something that I didn't even really have on my radar as far as a game. Like, I'm just not really that interested in Overwatch. But I do think it's interesting that if they're already having a pro league with an early build of Overwatch 2, it's safe to assume that, you know, Overwatch 2 is going to be coming out a lot sooner than a lot of people probably thought. Because I do think people were kind of chalking it up and they're like, oh, yeah, Overwatch 2 isn't coming anytime soon. When in fact, obviously, it clearly is. So it's really cool that they're, going to have Overwatch 2. Obviously, still on our shit list for a lot of different reasons, and rightfully so. But I will say, Overwatch 2 definitely going to be something that I'm hoping is a better game than the first Overwatch, and I'm sure it will be. But it's something that we've heard about for a very long time that we just really haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I think they announced, was it last? I think it was last year in 2020. No, it might have been 2019. When was that announcement date? Let me see. When was that announced? No, it's gonna bug me. I don't know. I don't want to dig around too much because I'm trying to go media blackout we're recording this during the PlayStation Showcase right now, and I'm trying to go media blackout so I can stay hyped for whenever I watch it and whatnot, and not know and be surprised because I'm a psycho like that. So I don't want to dig around too much, but it's been a couple years now since they announced it, and we got that full cinematic and a little bit of look at some alpha gameplay and things like that. So I wouldn't be shocked if it's comes out, especially too if they're playing an earlier, an early build of this game, quote unquote early build. If it's being played by your pro league right now, and we're not talking internal pro team like 343 has, or many of these other heavily esports influenced titles have to help balance for competition. We're not talking that. We're talking your multi-million-dollar league that you have that is has players signed under contract, and it's not necessarily a pro team that's being testing the game and balancing the game. These are pro players learning to play the game at this point. So it's like, it's interesting, that approach to it, because that tells me that how early of a build is this game. It can't be that early if you're feeling comfortable enough to have this be your game. And granted, Overwatch 2 is very much in a way similar to how Destiny 2 is, where I feel very much, and I think that's, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but, probably a reason why Jeff Kaplan left Overwatch, because it very much sounds like how Bungie wanted Destiny to be, have this 10-year plan, have this, Destiny as a platform almost, where Activision was like, okay, yeah, Destiny, and then we're going to do Destiny 2, and then we're going to do Destiny 3, and truncated versions of this game to push out to sell to more people, where Jeff was very adamant on, I want Overwatch 1 players to be able to play with Overwatch 2 players. And have this game be, very much, this is an Activision decision. And it's, yes, we're going to have some improvements visually. We're going to have some improvements, I'm sure, to the engine overall. Some tweaks to their tool set that they've been updating over time. And kind of bring this game, mostly bringing this game to the next generation of, the consoles, obviously, but tech on PC as well, which being its primary platform. But I think this is mostly...
Can I
go ahead?
I know like this is kind of random, but I just got word, and I don't want to spoil too much from the Sony thing that you're trying to avoid, but I will say I was just reading through Twitter because there was some Ravens player. There's like another one of the running backs tore their ACL. Marcus Peters, their star cornerback, also tore an ACL this year. But because you covered Alan Wake, I will say, got a little spoiler. It's coming out October 5th.
Okay, you know what? That's actually what I mean, we just talked about that beforehand too, that they were saying, oh, if that site is, that leaked it originally, the retailer that leaked it originally was truly, legitimate, which it was because they announced it right after, that they had October 5th. So that makes a ton of sense. Plus, two, it's Halloween time, spooky time, we're all good. Yeah, spoopy.
3 spoopy, 5 you.
Very spoopy. But yeah, Overwatch 2, it's very much going to be, I think, just a refreshed version of Overwatch that is much more of an Activision decision. This is very much just Activision being like, no, you have
Money
to put out a new
grubbing.
one. Yeah, exactly. And I won't mince words of that. I feel very adamant in that. Because, and I think that's a, like I said, don't want to put words in anybody's mouth or, say they do things or whatnot, but a big reason why I feel Jeff Kaplan left the Overwatch team, just for the sole fact of, but he was very adamant of, I want Overwatch 1 players to play with Overwatch 2, and they agreed to that, but they were very adamant of making this a game that there is a divide between this game to some degree, that there is Overwatch 1 and there is an Overwatch 2, so.
But also fuck Activision.
Right, yeah, I just don't, the whole thing with that is just fucking weird. I don't know.
I'm trying to say fuck Blizzard.
More so fuck Blizzard, because at least Activision has been kind of fucking not pulling punch. Like, they've been doing some things. They've actually been making some decisions and some moves somewhat. I'm not saying that's the only thing by any means, and that's, we're all good now, but it's at least, I don't think, completely falling on deaf ears. But they were also then just the next day pushing Call of Duty and, not putting Activision in the trailer or anything like that. But it's one of those things too. We're talking about a loud minority that fucked over so many, good-hearted, well-meaning people who work there. So anyways, though, Mike, let's head into our big topics for this week. It's kind of a weird week. There's a lot of kind of two negative ones and then kind of a good one. I don't really know, but it's we got a real shitty story, and then we got a kind of shitty story that, kind of there's a gray area, and then we actually talk video games. So let's kick it off and get the bad news out of the way, of course. Well, good, bad, however you want to look at it, I guess. Anyways, though, let's get the heavy one out of the way. There we go. Tripwire CEO John Gibson steps down following controversial comments on Texas anti-abortion law. This comes from Adam Bankhurst over at IGN, as always. Link in the description. Adam does great work over there. Kind of funny best friend himself. So go over there, give a click to Adam, check out his writing. Following his comments supporting the Texas anti-abortion law, Tripwire CEO John Gibson has stepped down from the company behind such games as Maneater and Chivalry 2. Tripwire announced the news alongside confirming that co-founder, member, and current vice president Alan Wilson will now act as interim CEO. In its statement, Tripwire shared that Gibson's views do not reflect the company's as a whole, and that, quote, his comments disregard the values of our whole team, our partners, and much of our broader community. The comments by John Gibson are of his own and do not reflect those of Tripwire Interactive as a company, Tripwire wrote. His comments disregard the values of our whole team, our partners, and much of our broader community. Our leadership team at Tripwire are deeply sorry and are unified in our commitment to take swift action and to foster a more positive environment. Effective immediately, John Gibson has stepped down as CEO of Tripwire Interactive. Co-founding member and current vice president Alan Wilson will take over as interim CEO. Alan has been with the company since its formation in 2005 and is an active lead in both the studio's business and development affairs. Alan will work with the rest of the Tripwire leadership team to take steps with employees and partners to addressing their concerns, including executing a company-wide town hall meeting and promoting open dialogue with Tripwire's leadership and all employees. His understanding of both the company's culture and the creative vision of this game will carry the team through this transition with full support from other Tripwire leaders. End quote. The previously mentioned comments from Gibson were tweeted on September 4th, with the ex-CEO writing he was, quote, proud of #US Supreme Court affirming the Texas law banning abortion for babies with a heartbeat. Quote, as an entertainer, I don't get political often, Gibson continued. Yet, with so many vocal peers on the other side of the issue, I felt it was important to go on the record as a pro-life game developer. Following his tweet, developers who had been working closely with Tripwire, including Shipwright Studios, who worked on both Maneater and Chivalry 2, and Chivalry 2's lead developer, Torn Banner Studios, spoke up against Gibson's statements. Shipwright Studio even went so far as to say it was canceling its existing contracts with Tripwire under the, quote, current leadership structure. The anti-abortion law in question is one that the U.S. Supreme Court recently refused to block, and one that forbids the majority of abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy. This includes those pregnancies that were from rape or incest. Furthermore, those who sue clinics that are performing abortions could be awarded $10,000 per illegal abortion if found guilty. So we kind of talked about the idea of separating art from the artist last week a little bit. But funny enough, obviously, I think this hits a little bit harder this week in regards to the comments being made. Now, obviously, everyone is entitled to their opinions, but, me personally, I think I've been very vocal of, I'm in the camp of, it's a woman's body, and I, as a, man, shouldn't necessarily have the right to have a choice in what a woman does with her body. Personally, outside of, I'm sure there's conversations to be had between couples and things like that. But, I, as a man, don't have a woman's body, and I don't think I should have anything to say about a woman's body and, what she does with it necessarily. So, but everyone's entitled to their own opinions to a degree. But there's an interesting conversation to be had here in regards to kind of our initial statement of separating the art from the artist. Given Tripwire's response to the statement made by Gibson, Mike, should fans of Tripwire's games, if they're on the opposite side of that, feel shame or have an issue playing their titles because of one person's opinion? Kind of what I was saying about, the loud minority versus the, silent majority. Should others who have a different opinion, who poured their creative energy into these games, suffer because of the words of one person?
No, I don't. This is kind of similar to, talking about the Blizzard situation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people, there's a lot of moving parts that whenever games are developed like this, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And those people who have poured their heart and soul into making a game shouldn't be held accountable for the actions of one person. I will say, like, in general, I'm a pretty big fan of freedom of speech, and I understand, there's a line that comes with that.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you're an employee of a company, you have to be careful with what you're saying, what you're stating, because this is the type of outcome that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just gonna go ahead and say, like, whether or not I agree with abortion, because, like you said, it's a matter of fact of, I believe in someone's right to choose to a certain extent, things of that nature. And the only thing I'm really gonna say is I'm definitely for speaking your mind, but there's going to be repercussions when you speak your mind, and we've seen this movie play out time and time again. And if anyone thought that this was going to be anything different, you're foolish, because this is the way things have been going for a very long time in America recently. And again, whether or not, like, you agree with the message or you agree with
I think
whomever you agree with, it's not. He's speaking almost for an entire private entity when that's just not the right thing to do.
Right. And that's what, and I think a lot of people more so, because I think a lot of people are like, the people who are on, Gibson's side, who are kind of, pro-life, are saying this, like, people think who are against that view are, like, for abortions. And no, that's not what kind of people are saying. They're more pro-choice. It's just, it's not, people love abortions or anything. No, it's a horrifying experience that nobody ever wants to go through. It's more so the choice of it. And and I think that's what so many people are obviously up in arms about this, for the fact of, you see what's going on with Texas. But more so to the fact, though, that to our conversation, yes, I agree with you that it's, I am one who believes in the freedom of speech like you. Like, I would think, every American. But it's one of those things that we saw a lot with the election. We saw a lot with, different things going on that, just because there is the freedom of speech and you can say those things, doesn't mean that, one, people can think you're an asshole. Like, you could just, and I'm not, I don't want to say, oh, I'm not saying he's an asshole, because I'm on the other side of his opinion, but more so of, if you say things that are, can be viewed as outlandish or, that are against the grain, or that, you're allowed to say those things, but people are also allowed to show you the door as well, like both socially or, if you're a CEO of a company, you're a CEO of a game development company who has two pretty successful games this past, year and a half. Like, you gotta, like, it's one of those things that you just gotta be careful what you say. Like, I mean, it's one thing if it's like, oh, I made a scandalous joke 15 years ago. And it's like, okay, what are you like now? What have you done now? Have you changed? Have you been, how do you present yourself now? Like, okay, yes, I said something dumb when I was in college, or did something dumb when I was in college that was like, that wouldn't be socially acceptable now, but I've grown as a person. I see why that was wrong, why that's not funny, or this or that. Like, okay, yes, that's different, but we're talking, if somebody's standing their ground on the things that, oh, well, yeah, I said that and I stand by that and this and that. Okay, well, socially, if a lot of people have changed and socially that's not necessarily super acceptable now, and you're doubling down on that, well, then it's a problem, or, you're allowed to believe that, sure, but, you have to understand if people are willing to then, okay, well, we're going to show you the door because we can't have you necessarily represent our company that way.
That's the big sticking point, because he's right. If he was on the other side of the aisle, no one would have even batted an eye. Everyone would have actually come to his defense. But because he believes the opposite, he's the pariah. He's the one losing his job and everything. And again, that's the double-edged sword with freedom of speech, is like, yes, absolutely, it cuts one way that you're allowed to say whatever the hell you want to say, but it's also going to cut the other way, and you're going to get axed whenever you say something that, even if it's not, there might be a majority that's in the opposite camp, but because the public eye and media is absolutely against that entire method of thinking, you're going to pay the price. And that's the nature of the beast. I'm not saying, I don't necessarily agree with, I just don't think that, let me put it this way. When you went through your explanation, you're talking about, oh, if you said something dumb years ago, I don't think even what he said is like, I wouldn't even consider it like super dumb, because he believes that. Like, it's not like he said something racist or something of the sort, or he should be canceled for that. Does he have an unpopular opinion in the normal media today? Absolutely. But I don't think he should be treated the same way as someone who sexually assaulted someone necessarily. That's my only problem with the entire process of cancel culture today, is like, people are paying the same price as people who've done heinous things. And it's just crazy. We're not talking about like Tim Allen being like a staunch Republican and a moron. Like, I don't think it's the same thing, in my opinion, but it is what it is. I mean, he lost his job. If I said something like this publicly, I would expect similar recourse, but if you believe it, then he's going to probably take the L and move on with his life, which I'm sure is what he's, going to do. I don't see anything else happening here.
Yeah. And yeah, that's what, and I'm the same way. Like, how do I want to word this? Because I've been pretty vocal at saying, like, I'm on the opposite side of the aisle. I am, more pro-choice, but I also am in the fact of what he said wasn't heinous. What he did wasn't necessarily, no, he didn't go and sexually assault a woman. He didn't, or a man, or whatever. You get what I'm saying. It wasn't, he didn't murder anybody by any means, but a similar, at the same time too, yes, nobody's coming to arrest him or anything like that. He lost his job because he said that. And if that doesn't align with the company's views, okay, well, you are a prominent member of that company. You're not, an entry-level employee or something like that might just kind of fly under the radar or something like that. Even then, but, it just is what it is. That's what, I don't know anything personally about the guy. And yeah, he didn't say like anything heinous in terms of like, oh, I don't feel any sympathy for these, derogatory terms towards a woman, insert here, like, because you couldn't keep your legs closed or this or that, blah, blah, blah. Like that you hear from so many dumbasses when it comes to this topic.
Like our previous president previous president was way worse spoken
Right.
than this person. But it does go to show where society in the workplace has progressed.
Mhm.
And I think that's another major point of this is like things that used to say in the workplace even 5 or 6 years ago don't fly anymore.
Mhm.
So people just do need to adapt with those changes. I'm not saying I like, all I'm trying to say is I don't necessarily agree with this particular case as far as, because like if it's almost getting to the point where freedom of speech and freedom of religion are almost going to be getting you into hot water because you're a Christian. If you're a Christian and you're a staunch Christian, you might not believe in abortion, and all of a sudden, like, because you don't believe in abortion, you're going to lose your job and things of that nature. So you're just muzzling a portion
Mhm.
of the society when the opposite was muzzled for a long time. So we're just going through like the ebbs and flows of society and which way it's going to go. And it's like Quentin Tarantino was in an interview where he was talking about movies. He was talking about how PC, and that's politically correct for those outside of America, how politically correct movies were in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And as is, like, the 80s was a super politically correct time for movies.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came out with Reservoir Dogs in the 90s and kind of blew the doors off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And now we see society going back the other way. So it's one thing that, like, you have the wild 70s where everyone's naked. Then you go to the 80s that everyone's starting to become more conservative with things of that nature. And then now we're back to the 90s, now the 2000s, and now, we're going back. And it's just society goes back and forth. And then
ebbs and flows.
Maybe by 2030, everything like the woke media and everything like that's going to go away or change. But it's crazy to see where we've gotten as a society as far as like maybe 10 years or maybe, well, probably more than 10 years ago, 15 years ago, he wouldn't have even had a platform to share this opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And he wouldn't have even had a platform to lose his job. So I do think it's a beneficiary to society today that there's more ways for idiots to expose themselves to a certain extent too.
Yeah, it's a very big ball of wax that is, and like I said, I'm very much on the opposite fence of him. I am very much, I don't agree with that. But the way he says it, like I said, it wasn't heinous, it wasn't derogatory. He was just stating his opinion. But in stating your opinion and the industry you're in, which is very, I would say very liberal, to say the least. And as somebody who is a registered Democrat right now, a lot of those views do align with me personally, but I'm also not one to close the door on anybody by any means. And I was just raised on you respect other people's opinions, obviously, unless they're derogatory or anything like that. And, it is what it is, but you can't, at the same time, like I said, it's kind of the whole Trump on Twitter thing and him getting booted off and stuff like that. There was a great comic that I saw that somebody drew up that was like, yes, you can say those things, freedom of speech, this and that's totally fine, but that doesn't stop people from thinking what you're saying is stupid or you're an asshole or, and then showing you the proverbial door. Like, in Twitter's private platform, like, they have a privacy policy and a terms of service and stuff. Like, you agree to that when you sign up to it, and they have the right to just, okay, cool, well, shut your Twitter account down because it goes against, our terms of service and this and that. And, it just, I think people just kind of look at, people sometimes skew the freedom of speech, flag that they wave sometimes. And it's like, well, yes, you're allowed to say that, but people can also think you're an asshole, and you can also, what you say can get you fired from your job. Like, it is what it is, man. Like, read the room kind of thing. You're allowed to have that opinion. Sometimes keep that opinion to yourself in the situation you're in, kind of thing. I don't know. Anyways, Mike, let's move on and start talking about more video game stuff. Next one coming up here, Take-Two is suing the creators of GTA 3 and Vice City reverse engineering projects. This comes from Chris Scullion over at VGC, as always, link in the description. Take-Two Interactive is suing a group of programmers who have reversed engineered the source code for Grand Theft Auto 3 and Grand Theft Auto Vice City. The suit, which was filed in California, is aimed at 14 programmers from around the world who have been working together to make derivative source codes for both games. The result is the RE3 project, which offers, quote, the fully reversed source code for Grand Theft Auto 3 and Grand Theft Auto Vice City, as well as ports for the game for Switch, Wii U, and Vita. The project also includes some improvements to the original games, including bug fixes, a rotatable camera, X input controller support on PC, widescreen support, and no loading between islands. Many reverse engineering teams believe their work is technically made legal because they do not use leaked source code and instead recreate the original game from scratch using modern coding languages. Projects like RE3's also contain no actual Rockstar created assets such as music, dialogue, and imagery, so players need to own a copy of Grand Theft Auto 3 to build their own port using the reverse engineered code. Recently, a similar fan effort was available to fully reverse engineer Super Mario 64 and port it to PC and other platforms. Those efforts took more than 2 years, and so far Nintendo has not taken legal action against its creators. Despite this, Take-Two is now suing the programmers who worked on the GTA project, claiming they are, quote, are well aware that they do not possess the right to copy, adapt, or distribute derivative GTA source code or the audio-visual elements of the game, and that doing so constitutes copyright infringement, end quote. According to the suit, Take-Two tried to remove the RE3 project from GitHub, but 3 of the programmers, quote, knowingly filled bad faith counter notifications that manually misrepresented the legality of their content, apparently claiming that because they allegedly reverse engineered the game's source code, they somehow cannot be liable for copyright infringement. The suit claims that the project is causing, quote, irreparable harm to Take-Two, and that the programmers have, quote, appropriated a market that belongs to Take-Two, namely the market for modified or handheld versions of the game, and enabled countless others to now create their own unauthorized derivative versions of the games, end quote. By copying, adapting, and distributing source code and other content related to the game, defendants have deliberately and intentionally infringed Take-Two's protectable expression, the company argues. Take-Two has never authorized or given consent to the defendants to use their copyrighted works in the manner complained of herein. Accordingly, defendants have infringed Take-Two's exclusive rights under copyright. Reports last month, which matched what VGC had heard from its own sources, say that Rockstar is preparing to release remastered versions of GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas on all modern systems, including the Switch. The RE3 project is the latest example of programmers trying to port copyrighted games to other systems by reverse engineering them and rebuilding their source codes from scratch, so it isn't technically using any actual elements of the original work. After a 2019 recompilation project which saw fans reverse engineering the source code for Super Mario 64, a fully functioning 4K widescreen port was released in 2020, followed by 3DS and DSi ports. So this is kind of a tough nut to crack, especially as someone like me who is heavily in the camp of supporting game preservation in any way possible, period. While this is made from the ground up by revising the source code of other games, it's an interesting issue to think about, I guess, considering you do need to own a copy of the game to import these assets if you want them. So legally, it's very much in the realm of it's like, so you're allowed to own a ROM of a game. Like, you're allowed to go and technically download a ROM of a game. Like, say, Ocarina of Time. I want to have a copy of Ocarina of Time on my PC, technically as a backup, because that's what ROMs are for the most part. They're just backups of these games. That's totally cool, as long as I physically own the game. Like, I have to own Ocarina of Time. I can go over to my shelf, grab my copy of Oot that I've had for fucking how many years now, and cool, here it is. So I can have that. So that's where it kind of gets a little iffy. So, Mike, does Take-Two really have a complete leg to stand on? They have some kind of a leg to stand on, obviously, but do they have a really complete, full-functioning leg to stand on with this one? Or should they have every right to really pursue this, given, the intellectual property does belong to them, not to mention, obviously, with like the article said and what we've reported on before, the rumored versions of remastered versions of GTA 3, Vice City, San Andreas supposedly are dropping relatively soon. What do you kind of make of all this?
I think it's kind of like the Halo 3 online community that used to exist. It kind of reminds me of that. So basically, some people, just some backstory because it's relevant. For once, this is actually relevant to the podcast. But some guys got hold of some source code for a Halo 3 PC port that was supposed to be in Russia, and they kind of edited it and made it working. And essentially what wound up happening is you saw a community kind of grow from the grassroots, and then eventually when Halo Master Chief Collection is coming out, all of a sudden they're getting cease and desisted by Microsoft because of it, where before Microsoft was pretty much just like, yeah, we don't give a fuck, like, you guys are fine doing what you're doing. And now we see, them get cease and desisted. And also, little behind the
inside baseball
was Microsoft actually contacted these folks and were like, hey, we really love what you guys did, we'll just go ahead and give you guys jobs. And obviously that never came to fruition. None of those guys got jobs that worked so hard on Halo 3. But it's definitely feeling like a similar circumstance where, like, now all of a sudden, because they're actually going to put the game out, they have a problem with it because they want to make money off of it. Or should I say more money off of it, because you still have to purchase the game, sure. But like, if they're making a remastered game, they want to make all the money off of it, if that makes any sense to those out there. So like, do they have a leg to stand on legally? So another inside baseball for those of you that might not be familiar with, we have a lot of listeners that are outside of America.
True.
They're basically, for those of you out there, because I was training to study law, but didn't want to take on any more student debt. Basically, American law is modeled after British law, which is modeled after basically precedents being set in court. So what that means is a lot of lawyers and a lot of cases go like this. Maybe not so much criminal, but tax reform, anything like tax fraud, anything like that. It is one lawyer's job to prove how this case, especially to the judge, not so much when there's a jury, how this case is identical or exactly like or pretty similar to or almost identical to XYZ case, which would be all like ruling in favor of his defendant or his client. And then alternatively, it's the other lawyer's job to say this is not like the other. So whenever there's precedent set, like if a judge in a Supreme Court rules one way, basically every judge after that, unless something drastically changes, every judge after that rules in the exact same manner. I don't know how they're going to have precedent set for this. I don't know if they're going to go off of Napster and music. I don't know if they're going to go off of movies. Like, I don't know how they're going to handle this. But by and large, that would be the question as to whether or not they have any legal ground to stand on, is how was this ruled on previously? Are there any cases like this? Is this going to be a brand new case? If it isn't, if it isn't ruled, how they want it to be ruled on, or if it isn't in their favor, are they going to go ahead and just escalate it up and go up and up in the court systems until maybe getting to the Supreme Court? And then there's going to be a ruling. And once the Supreme Court rules on it, precedent is pretty much set in stone. So that's how the court system in America works. Love it or hate it. It's just the way it is, and it's the way it's kind of always been. So, we'll see what comes of this, but I am interested to see how it plays out, just from someone who is just genuinely interested in the law. I'm just curious to see how it's taken and how it's judged in the court of law.
Yeah,
because we could see a lot of things, games that kind of come to mind when you're starting to look into this is like, what game's going to be next? Like, what remaster is going to be next? Is there a remaster for a certain game we didn't know coming out soon? And is it going to be different, or what's happening.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing, because this is going to be really kind of one of those tentpole examples now. Because and it's so funny, it's ironic too, because obviously I know this is an Xbox show, but Nintendo is notorious for shutting down and
Being little
sending
bitches.
sending cease and desist and letters, and shutting down fan projects and everything like that. But granted, they're one of the most popular companies to have fan projects made for. Like, I get it, but at the same time too, Nintendo has milked so many other franchises for so long too, that I get it, because technically, yes, they own that intellectual property. If they're, if they own that intellectual property, it's theirs to do what they choose to do with. I mean, they don't have to do PC ports, they don't have to do anything like that, but that means that nobody else can do that because they have copyright, on it. I'm really curious to see how this kind of plays out, because, like you said, it's similar to Halo Online, where, yeah, before, they really had truly solidified plans to bring the Master Chief Collection to PC, yeah, it was totally fun. Then Microsoft didn't care that they were doing that. Yeah, whatever, keep playing on PC, this, Russian version of this game that you kind of re-engineered a little bit to, kind of fit what you guys wanted. Sure, whatever. Go ahead and take it. Do with it as you please for right now. But then once Microsoft wanted to, bring MCC to PC because they saw that there was a market for it, well then, that's a problem, because
Then it became an issue.
yeah, and so it's just kind of one of those things. And Grand Theft Auto is one of the, if not the biggest entertainment property out, one of the biggest entertainment properties out there, selling millions and millions and millions and millions of copies across its franchise. That, I get it, they're going to milk this for everything they can, but at the same time too, this is I see this more as a mod than truly anything, because like the article says, like, you have to own a copy of GTA 3 to have access to this stuff, because you can't just go and grab this and play this. Like, that's not how this works, to my knowledge at least. This is something you download the source, there's re-engineered source code for this, and then plug this in there, and take, the assets that they have and plug it into all of the game files that you have. This is more modding to me than anything. It's improving what is there. You have to, though, have the foundation of it to begin with. You have to have the skeleton of the game to be able to do this, to change some of the skeleton, to be able to swap some of the bones out of this game. Like,
That's kind of similar to, I was looking into it because I wanted to see what was available for Xbox, and there's an emulator called I guess it's Xemu or Xemu or it's called.
yeah.
But you have to have the games in order to be able to get them on. Like, it has a tutorial on how to get your games onto PC, but there's no files and there's no way to make it work, like, basically without actually having the games. So they have a website that lists, like, all the games that work with them, right? But you have to have the original copies of the games to be able to actually play them.
Right.
So, like, Amped 2 is a game that works really well on Xemu, but you have to have Amped 2 on disk to be able to get some of the files off of the disk itself for it to work. So I think that's kind of similar, and I think it's an interesting way, because it's like, I bought the fucking game. I don't have an original Xbox anymore, which I do, but it's at Adams or something. But, like, I don't have an original Xbox anymore. How the hell am I supposed to play these games that I spent all this money on back then? But so that's like a legitimate answer to that, which I appreciate. So it seems like that's kind of the same way, which, makes a whole shit ton of sense.
No, definitely. And that's where I think the whole side of game preservation, the argument that comes up with it of, especially some of these games that, are either oddities or, have these different stories behind them that have then fell to the wayside that because of licensing issues. I mean, hell, GoldenEye is the biggest example of that. Nobody will ever be able to get a true remaster, or not even that, but like a port of GoldenEye, because the license for Bond is so, like, for that game, or with that developer, that game, that license, it is just a clusterfuck. And it's just kind of out in the wind, because it'd just be too much of a legal headache to go and make that happen. Yeah, it'd sell great, but is it worth all the money that we'd have to spend legally to make it happen? Probably not, like, in their eyes. That but what happens whenever eventually, you want to play that game, and there's going to become a point where either one, we get 50 years down the road, and you to be able to buy a cart of GoldenEye, it's going to be $1,000 or something like that. Who knows? I mean, eventually we're going to get to a point where, the stock that's out there right now of GoldenEye carts on the secondary market, because they're clearly not reproducing, or they're not producing this game anymore, that are out there, they're going to degrade over time. There's only going to be a fraction of those left that actually work. So how are you going to actually get to play it without going online and downloading a ROM of it?
Are you talking me into just going out and buying a shit ton of cartridges of GoldenEye right now?
Yeah, I guess so. GoldenEye actually isn't that expensive. Right? It usually goes for around
it's like
20, 30
What is it
bucks.
like? It's like $30, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's
20.
well worth it.
Oh my god, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's
if you want me, if you're inviting me, hey guys, everyone out there that's a listener, if you're inviting me to scalp the shit out of it in like 10, 15 years, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
I mean, that's why I got my complete in box GoldenEye that I lucked out on that I got up there. So I'm holding on to that for a long time. But yeah, it's just one of those things that it's like, the PC ports of these games that we're talking about, like GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas, like, they're kind of a little finicky to play with on modern PC. So it's like, I get it. And people want to play these games on different platforms, and there's no option to do that. Like, yes, they hold the right to say yes or no to a lot of these things, but sometimes it's like, okay, well, you have to they own a copy of your game. They're just trying to improve the experience a little bit. Like, they're not trying to make a quick buck off of it or anything like that. It's a fan project. They're trying to take what they have and take what you have and make it better, and hell, even make it better for you. Like, they're just trying to get a better experience out of it. So that's where it just kind of gets frustrating with a lot of that shit. But anywho, Mike, let's head into our last news article for the day, and let's actually talk games. Let's talk actual games and gameplay and stuff. And of course, it wouldn't be a GPGC episode without talking Halo Infinite at this point. So Halo Infinite makes another major change to the radar after its beta. This comes from Haley Williams. Don't worry, I checked. It's not her. Via GameSpot. No.
also, sorry to interrupt you, Travis, but I did just come across 58 minutes ago. So after the start of our show, Halo, the official Twitter, released an update saying the next Halo Infinite multiplayer preview is targeted to arrive on September 24th. All fully registered Halo Insider profiles as of September 13th are eligible to participate. Don't miss out. Head to aka.ms/Halo Insider. Get your profile fully filled out, and then prepare for takeoff. If you're looking for extra pointers on how to fully register, be sure to check here, and then there's a link there. So make sure you guys are signed up for the Insider. We finally have an announcement of another Halo Insider
And from
build.
what it sounds like, fully open to everyone at this time.
Yeah, hopefully. So everyone go get signed up so you can get chosen for it or whatever. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I felt like that was a pretty big deal, obviously.
No, that's good to know. I was just looking the other day. I was like, they still haven't announced the next one. I was like, and launch is not that far away. So I'm glad we now have that, because that makes me excited. I'm ready to play more of this game because I really enjoyed my time with the tech preview. And hopefully,
I would like to play it once, for fuck's sake, but I'm gonna be like I said, I'm gonna be at a wedding in Columbus, but I would like to fucking play the goddamn thing at some point. Oh, don't worry. They sent me an insider invite for season 8 of MCC, but guess whose ass was fucking boycotting? I ain't playing that shit. Let me play the good thing.
Yeah, the thing you've been playing, the same thing you've been playing for fucking how many years now? 14 years? So, there you go. Anyways, though, let's talk radar, baby, in Halo Infinite. So, like I said,
not.
This comes from Haley Williams over at GameSpot, as always, link in the description. After Halo Infinite's long-awaited first beta, the team at 343 Industries has been hard at work gathering and processing player feedback from the play test. Now, in one of 343's characteristically long and in-depth blogs updates, the studio is sharing some of that feedback and how it's been implemented, including updates to Infinite's continuous radar changes. 343 first hinted that Infinite would be shaking up Halo's classic motion tracking radar all the way back in 2017, when similar changes were introduced in Halo 5. In that game, the changes were only introduced in ranked modes, limiting the motion sensor to only show players who were sprinting or shooting, rather than all walking speed movement. While the changes made sense for competitive ranked play, a similar iteration in the Halo Infinite beta wasn't well received by playtesters. Quote, the combat sensor or radar that sits in the bottom left of your HUD followed a different set of rules than the previous Halo titles. The Halo Infinite multiplayer team explained in the blog post. Quote, it only displayed enemies when they were sprinting or shooting, which was more in line with Halo 5's threat tracker. We knew that this implementation was going to feel different, maybe even a little contentious. That's why we wanted to get feedback on it as soon as possible in the tech preview. The outcome of the play testing is that 343 is going to revert to a much more traditional radar for Halo Infinite, with the blog post saying, quote, most players preferred the old radar style for social matches. Quote, we've updated the combat sensor to feel more like motion tracker of old, which shows all movement besides crouch walking, and should have that ready for folks to test in the next flight, the post promises. The post goes through a whole lot more detail on player feedback that'll be implemented into the game, with some changes due before the next beta test. Some in time for the game's launch on December 8th, and some scheduled to arrive post-launch. So, Mike, playing with the Halo 5 style radar during the tech preview definitely was something to get used to again after not playing that game in a super long time and playing MCC way more than that since 5. So it's nice to see what I consider a pretty major change to how the game plays in general, actually stemming from vocal player feedback in these flights. It's actually nice to see something, like I said, that I think is relatively major to how you play the game get changed from these flights, and actually you hear people talking about it and a change gets made. So do you think this is the right move in general? I know you haven't played the game yet, but from playing Halo for so long and playing a game in Halo 5 at one point that used a similar radar style to this, does a traditional Halo radar, is that the right move to make across game modes for Infinite, or does it really, I guess, matter all that much across the bigger picture of all players?
Yeah, I think going with a traditional Halo radar, I'm not going to mince words.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a radar player. Radar's for shit cans. It slows the game down. It's really bad for competitive integrity.
Mm-hmm.
But all things considered, it's fine for social. So yeah, I think a more traditional experience as far as radar is concerned is fair for social, but keep that shit out of competitive, because that's not where it belongs. It belongs in social, where people are having fun. And I don't even like it there per se, but like I get it. Like it is what it is. But yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of radar. I'm not going to mince my words on it. I thought the radar in Halo 5 was one of the big problems, and it's one of the things that ruined the entire game. So, I don't mind it in social, but keep it out of the rest of the game, please.
Yeah. So, which makes sense. I mean, there's no point to having something like that in ranked, period. I mean, that, like you said, it slows the game down, but it also just messes with the integrity of the game overall at that competitive, style of the game. But yeah, I mean, I don't mind it in social. I have no problem with it. If, I'm not that great at Halo, but it's for playing social matches. It doesn't bug me that much. And, it does make you obviously though play a different way when your mind is, glued to something like that, to make sure you're checking that. Like, it's just one of those things that you naturally will start playing a different way and playing more, I don't know how
it
to...
just slows it down. It does,
right,
because
yeah.
you're worried about showing up on radar first and foremost.
Yes.
But secondly, you're also worried about everyone else on the radar.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And I totally agree. So yeah, nice and short and sweet on that one, I guess. Anyways, Mike, let's head into Party Chat before we wrap up the episode this week. If you're new to the show, Party Chat's where we propose one question at the end of each week's show that we want to just discuss with you. Could be as simple as, what's your favorite story beat in the game? What have you been playing during this whole fucking pandemic in the world that feels like it will just never fucking end? Or it could be more in-depth as to like why the negative stigma with gaming still exists. What are some great games that can benefit the discussions around mental health and whatnot. And then after answering it ourselves and discussing it ourselves, we kick it over to you to tweet your responses over to us or email us to our responses to the question over on our Twitter at GPGC Podcast and in our email bonusaccessory@gmail.com. And we'll read some of the responses the following week. Last week's question: as a PC gaming continues to become more and more common within homes, will the practice of early access on consoles become much more commonplace? And Mike, he's finally back. Your boy, not Spider-Man 16, wrote in.
Yeah, baby. Welcome
Saying-
back, buddy.
Saying, yes, I envision most multiplayer Game Pass focused titles or even free-to-play ones on console lean into early access. So there you go. The prodigal son makes his return. So thank you for writing in, not Spider-Man 16. Anyways, Mike, this week's question. What is your desert island Xbox game? AKA, you're stuck on a desert island, you can only take, or a deserted island, you can only take one game with you from Xbox's history to play for the rest of your life on this island. What is it and why?
And I'm by myself.
And you're by yourself. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't have an internet connection. I'll leave that in there.
I'm gonna go ahead and treat this like I wouldn't have an internet connection. I'm gonna go ahead and pretend like I would be alone on this island.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna say, without a doubt, the game that I would like to have, and this is a lot harder than you think it is, so I'm gonna kill a little bit of time here. I'm gonna pretend like I'm circling around because I'm really trying to make a decision between Elder Scrolls Morrowind. Are we talking about original Xbox? What kind of Xbox?
We're talking from 2001's release of the Xbox to present day. If it is an
God.
Xbox, if it is part of Xbox's lineage, you can play it.
God.
Yeah.
Let's go with shit.
She.
Can we? Okay. I guess Oblivion. Well, that's not. Are you talking about an Xbox exclusive? If you're talking about Xbox exclusive, I'll go Morrowind. But Ninja Gaiden Black coming in a close second place, very close.
I mean, if you want to go exclusive, yeah, we could do that. See, I want to say Oblivion just because obviously I love that game and it is very deep, but I know that like if I want to go a fantasy route, I could like I think there's more content to keep you coming. I don't want to say coming back because I like the content in Oblivion a little bit more, but with Skyrim there's more content in general. This is tougher than I thought. And I'm the one who wrote the question.
I know.
I would have to say I'm going to go Skyrim. Just for the sole fact of there's more content to it. What?
Skyrim.
Dude, I would take all right, fuck it. I'm taking Oblivion. I'm taking Oblivion. Fuck it. You know what? I'll play it 65 billion times if I have to. That's okay. Second verse, same as the first. Whatever. I don't care. I'm sure we'll get things in the comments. Oh, that's all you guys ever talk about is that goddamn game. It's not that fucking great. Blah, 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 blah.
And suck my ass.
Yeah. The whole specific
No,
one.
hey, listen. I'm not justifying it. Suck my ass.
The whole too. Anyways, after that. Mike, I think that's going to do it for our episode this week. Before we go really off the rails here, why don't you tell people where they can find you on the internet to talk about all the shit we talked about today, whether it's, freedom of speech, I guess, and Halo Infinite, everything we really talked about, GTA, and how Rockstar is trying to maybe pinch a penny or two. Where can people find you on the internet to talk about all of this?
You can find me on Twitter at TOYSXLDIER or on Twitch at MP_Toy Soldier.
Nice. And as always, I'm your host, Travis White, aka Travelus, on most internet platforms, including at Travelus_ on Twitter. That's TRAVLESS_. You can also find me streaming time to time on twitch.tv/Travelus_, same as Twitter. And you want to play some video games with me, you could do so over on Xbox Live at just regular old Travelus. That's TRAVLESS. And this, ladies and gentlemen, has of course been your newest episode of the Game Pass Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox Game Pass, and of course PC gaming. including news, rumors, and conversations around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all that jazz, the whole rigmarole. Tell you every week, and if we're not on a podcast service that you want and you listen to, let me know, and I'll get you on there. I'll get us on there. We'll get you hooked up is what I'm trying to say. And follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything we're on the show, video games like, and of course our dope giveaways. And Mike, with that being said, it's going to do it for our episode this week. Thank you everyone so much for listening, sharing, and being a part of our growing community. Game on, wash your hands, listen to doctors, Black Lives Matter, and we will see you next week.